Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Tuesday, January 8th, 2013, and this is episode number 51.
In this episode, we're going to discuss the move towards better offline data about your customers, the emergence of connected technology and voice interface at CES, how Twitter's improving real-time search, and much more. Good evening, Sir O'Brien. How are you?
I am doing well. How's it going, Adam?
I've got a little sniffles, and as you were pointing out, it might just simply be allergies. But as I was saying, I don't want to be, sounded like I'm sniffing up the mic here when when we're doing the show. But so I'll do as we called it, the chocolate rain move. If anybody knows that internet video meme of turning away from the mic as I breathe.
There we go. And we might have to send you on a mission to check out something like Claritin. That stuff works wonders. I've used that for a while, and it clears you all up, and they don't kid around when they say non-drowsy. It's pretty impressive. So.
The way we did that, it's almost as if they were a sponsor of the show. For this show brought to you by Claritin. And
we'll have to reach out. We'll get an after the fact sponsor and bring them in.
There we go. So we got some cool stuff to cover today. All kinds of fun stuff. In fact, I think normally we try to do an infographic of the episode, and we're just going to kind of skip all that and get to it, right?
Yeah, we're going to jump right in. A couple interesting topics. And what's always nice, I enjoy it, is when we have not just a couple of individual stories, but when you start to see stories kind of come together and form a larger topic. It's generally indicating not just, one company doing something cool, but it's kind of the idea that you've stumbled upon a trend and that there might be more there on the horizon. So the first thing that we're going to jump into is the idea of companies gathering better physical data or better offline data about their customers. And I thought this one was interesting because, being a social, local, and mobile show, we talk a lot about online data and gathering online data about customers and social networks and who's buying what, who's leaving their carts empty, how do you follow up on it, that sort of thing.
On your website specifically, right? And that's what we mean by online is when we are doing all this tracking and stuff, it's all about what them visiting your website, your e-commerce store and such.
Exactly. And somebody goes to your actual site, or more specifically your online store, and they're browsing around. It's great to have data about how they found you, where they went inside of your store, how many pages they visited, that sort of thing. But there's a couple of companies that are starting to track offline data as well and bring some of that same concept of, really gathering data to the offline world. And one of which is the Disney company, and more specifically, the Disney World and Disneyland theme parks, which I thought this one was really interesting. It was not something that, you don't think of Disney as this sort of like tech leader, but they're doing something kind of cool with their theme park. So, Adam, maybe you could just walk us through a little bit of what the Disney company has released and, how it's starting to change the way people think about offline data.
Yeah, so Disney is going to be pumping close to $1 billion in creating a new system around their major parks that is going to be called MyMagic Plus. And what it's supposed to do, there's a number of things that it's supposed to do, and that the potential is pretty great. They will provide people the opportunity to purchase these bracelets. They call them magic bands, and they can connect various information to these magic bands that they'll have on their wrists as they go through the park, including credit card information and then likely demographic information. Who are you, and maybe preferences and things like that about things you want to experience or foods that you enjoy, that sort of thing. And then the entire park will essentially be wired in a way to interact with these bands, to use them to your advantage in different ways. Again, being connected to a credit card or a payment source, it makes it easier for you to worry less about, for instance, bringing cash and going to an ATM and all those sorts of things, and actually just walk up to a vendor, for instance, if you want to buy some popcorn, and use your wristband in order to pay for the popcorn. Imagine implications where, you have a couple teenage kids or whatever, and maybe they don't want to chill with mom and dad the entire time and they want to go off on their own. Well, you can in a way give them probably, and I would imagine they haven't said so far that they were going to say, let's make a limit as to how much kid A can get versus kid B and those sorts of things. But I would imagine that would be very, very easy. But to give them a certain amount of money that they could use on their wristbands, their magic bands, and go off and use those to buy things throughout the park. Taking this a step further and making it going beyond kind of this frictionless payment system that they're talking about integrating, it also helps to provide better service and more personalized service for different park patrons. So, for instance, you might be able to detect that it's Corey's birthday, and when you go and you interact with Mickey could actually interact back with you and say, "Corey, how you doing? Happy birthday," without you ever even have said anything. And imagine, kind of the special experience you might have if you bring your kid over and you've never once said anything, and suddenly a character is talking to them or interacting with them on a more personal basis. So there really are a lot of potential uses for this. It, of course, connects to this MyMagic Plus account, as I mentioned, which is likely something that you would manage from the web. And there are a lot of other benefits and things that you could do to kind of customize and plan your trip ahead of time. I think right now they already issue out wristbands to allow people to jump to the front of the line, skipping things. I didn't know that, but you could get wristbands that allow you to jump to the front of the line. Those sorts of things can be incorporated into the wristband as well. But ultimately what happens is not only does this make it a more personalized and reduce the friction of the experience that you have at the parks, but this is all data that feeds back to the big mother brain that looks this it's shaped like Mickey's head, that can take a hold of this data and can actually crunch it a bit and see what are some trends with their park. They can see things individually for each of their patrons, but also look at things on a broader scale and study how it's impacting their business and how they might end up changing or making things better for those who come to visit their park.
Yeah, and you mentioned being able to adjust the app settings through the internet. They're also enabling you to do so through their mobile application. So there's a big connection between the band and a mobile website, and they've actually integrated this into the park Wi-Fi. So they've made a big push to make sure that when you are on a Disney park, you have really great Wi-Fi access. You're not struggling to find signal. And part of the reason behind that is they want you to be able to adjust things like, when your son calls you up and says, "Hey, I'm across the park and I just found this cool hat that I want to get," you could kind of authorize that purchase and really take charge of that data. So that part of it's interesting. But, the part that to me stands out as being the just kind of futuristic, perfect use of this technology is the idea that they're going to essentially customize the entire park to your experience. So, Adam mentioned the characters coming up and greeting you by name. That part of it's cool. Even the kind of non-human characters, so the animatronics of the park, can interact with you and kind of, know where you are in relation to their own space and look at you and say your name and all that fun stuff. And it reminds me a lot of what Square's doing. So we've talked about Square in the past where, you sort of turn on this Square application. Businesses can know when you're in the vicinity. They can greet you by name. They can see how long you've been a customer, how frequently you buy things, and they can start to create offers based on that data. So I think, Square was sort of the pilot for this. And when you see Disney following suit and really customizing that experience, I think that there's a lot of potential there. There was even a quote in this article. It said, "When Disney makes a move, it moves the culture." So we talked about this with Square, thousands of people using the Square application. It starts to become more normal to have people that you don't know identifying you by your own name and calling you by your own name, Well, now take that and multiply it by the 60,000 people that move through a Disney park at any given day. And suddenly, it's no longer this weird thing to say, hey, John, nice to see you again, even though you don't know John personally, because the last time they went to a Disney park and the last time they went to a Starbucks and the last time they went to a food cart, they had that experience. It starts to become the norm and not the exception, which I think is, it happened rather fast. And I think it's going to continue at a quick pace with companies like Disney, customizing their experience to each individual user. Would you agree with that? Do you think that?
Alluding to the Square thing, right? And that's a good comparison to things that we've talked, about earlier, even throughout last year, because of all the moves that Square has made, including its partnership with Starbucks, right? And so Square kind of came out and everybody said, hey, that's pretty cool. And then they just really expanded through all the services that they're offering. But what happens with a move like, say, partnering with Starbucks is, like you said, it becomes the norm and therefore increases the velocity of adoption for this sort of technology. And so when a place like Disneyland does it, they are kind of one of the few folks out there that has $1 billion to just go ahead and throw at something like this and see and test and see if it's going to even be worth doing. I think it's worth doing. I think they're doing it in the right way. And then others will likely follow. They were talking in this article about other amusement parks, for instance, doing this sort of thing. And this is completely right. It builds into a loyalty program as well. I don't know. I personally think, you let me know what you think, but Disney is a place usually people go once every few years. It is a little bit pricey. It's not like there's all these Disney parks in everybody's neighborhood. They're in very particular specific places. And so it's one of those things that I think will make the experience really incredible for folks, and they'll have a lot of fun when they go there, and it'll make them remember that experience and so on. But I don't necessarily see it as being something that will cause people to go back suddenly next month or even next year, but it could actually convince people to be more loyal to places that are within the vicinity and places that are more repeatable, like, say, a movie theater. If you could have a movie theater that somehow was to take some similar technology and to have provide a more relevant experience for you, a more personalized experience for you, it's likely that you'll become more loyal to that particular movie chain. What do you think?
I think loyalty is a big part of this, and it's probably why something like a Disney chain and why Starbucks specifically are moving in that direction. And it's these small little touches, and that's another thing that was talked about in this article. It's not the idea that suddenly your entire experience is drastically different and, oh, you're cutting in line and you're this, VIP that can do no wrong. I think the idea is it's making those little interactions a little bit magical, a little bit special, and removing a lot of that friction. And that's what drives repeat customers. You think about the things that you frequent. It's not this magical world-changing event. It's just a place where everything runs a little smoother and everything seems to work a little better. And so I think that, repeat customers, repeat traffic is definitely a big driving force behind a lot of these technology shifts.
Now, obviously, we talked about some data being provided by the end user to Disney in this case. And in order to customize something or make it more relevant, you've got to go beyond, to some extent, just simply putting your credit card in to help you make payments. And people usually even have issues with that sometimes. What do you think might be some of the privacy implications of doing something like this, especially when you're customizing things to the liking of not only yourself, but also of your kids individually, and having that data associated with a physical device that's on them?
So what's interesting is Disney is being very progressive with it, with asking people what types of information they want to share. They're kind of explaining how that information is going to be used. So for instance, when you're setting up your profile, it's asking you, what's your name? And it explains, we're going to use this to allow customers and allow characters to greet you by name. The flip side of that is another company that made an announcement recently called Euclid Analytics. And Euclid Analytics is an analytics platform for stores. And what they're using is anonymous Wi-Fi data to actually track customers through the store experience. So they can see when somebody arrives at the store, they can see generally where in the store that person goes, and then they can also track whether or not they end up at the register or not, so they can tell the percentage of people walking through the door, how many are actually walking out with a purchase or a product. So on that side, you've got very anonymous data where, all of the value is being captured by the store, but in exchange, they can't capture a lot of actual data. They don't know the names of people. They're having a harder time tracking how many exact people become repeat customers. They can try to do things like device IDs, but that becomes a little bit of a muddy ground there. So that's one side of the scale where everything is extremely anonymous, but it's because there isn't a lot of value to the consumer. Versus Disney, everything is very upfront. They're gathering a lot of information. They're gathering credit card numbers. They're gathering names. They're gathering birth dates. All of this information. But it's also because they're providing a lot of value. They're providing a customized experience. They're providing you the ability to not have to walk around with your wallet. If your band gets stolen, you can log into the mobile app and shut it down. So it's not like people can take it and make purchases without your authorization. So I think there's a sliding scale. The more value you can provide, the more data that you can ask for and receive from customers. And I also think that people become more comfortable with the privacy implications as companies like Disney and as companies like Starbucks put their name behind it. It's kind of legitimizing the behavior and legitimizing the idea of, doing some data tracking and some location tracking in exchange for added value and added slickness to your overall experience.
Hey, ultimately, that's what it boils down to when you look at what is going on with people using data for, and we're talking social data and online data and so on, for marketing. It is a trade-off of privacy for more relevant content or more relevant, advertising or offers and those sorts of things. And it's interesting when you hear people get very, very frustrated with, hey, well, I don't want to give these people my information and so on. I do think that there's a line to be drawn, but at the same time, there definitely is a tremendous trade-off of savings in time, savings in money, discovery of things that are much more what it is that you want versus, this kind of wide net being cast by advertisers to everybody that when you receive things in the mail or you're watching TV commercials and those things are not at all tailored towards your specific interest potentially, but with all of this data that's available and things being connected to the internet, as we'll talk a little bit more in the future in a minute here, the ability for your world to be a bit more personalized, both an experience, like you said, at Disney, and also though in regards to how you're being marketed to. I don't think more marketing per se is better, but more relevant marketing is definitely a big plus for this kind of thing. To expand a little bit on the Euclid platform, which I think is really interesting, because I actually was aware of Euclid a long time ago when they first launched, and so what they talked about here at CES was actually something they're calling Euclid Zero, which is previously, in order to really kind of interact and have this sort of tracking. There really isn't anybody else out there that I see is doing any of the similar sort of tracking to this extent, but any sort of like location-based stuff like Shopkick and many of those others were used to use hardware at their places. So you'd actually have to install a third-party piece of hardware in order to track that sort of thing. Euclid Zero now says you can either have hardware if you want, and we have hardware to give to you to help facilitate this, or now you can just do it strictly with your Wi-Fi, and they have some sort of software connected solution that does it directly with your Wi-Fi. But imagine Euclid essentially being like Google Analytics for your business, for your brick and mortar store. And so being able to track similar things or do similar things like you might do in order to make your website a more effective place to sell, you can do similar things with Euclid. So doing things like, for instance, imagine A/B testing. A/B testing your website, trying out different colors and different banners and seeing how they work. Well, maybe A/B testing your windows. When people come over and they do some window shopping and they see a product in the window, that's a decision-making time to say, do I step into that place? And you can actually track and see how effective one window dressing is versus another window dressing. Some of the other things that they have on their site that I think are really interesting are things like how many people walked by but didn't come in. What they call the capture rate is how many people actually came into the store after seeing your window dressing or whatever you had on display. Of course, your conversions, so your conversions into sale. Lots and lots of information here that is much akin to Google Analytics, and then obviously much more tailored towards the experience of visitors outside, inside, and then ultimately paying for purchases inside your store.
Yeah, the other thing that it reminds me of is something that I was thinking about with the Apple App Store app. It's a lot of app in one sentence. But the App Store application that Apple put out, the Apple Store application allows you to walk into the Apple Store, scan a product, pay for it, and walk out without ever talking to a retail person, a checkout person, anything. You can take care of the entire process by yourself. But what it made me think of is the same thing that online retailers do, where you can kind of cookie somebody, and if they don't end up buying the product that they looked at for 10 minutes, you can remind them a week later and say, hey, are you still interested in that? Here's 10% off if you buy today. Well, that works well in the online world, but why couldn't you also do that in the offline world? So, again, this does require a little bit of a value exchange, but if I scanned a product with the Apple Store app and didn't end up actually buying it, well, they now know when I walk out the store that I was interested in that but didn't buy it. So they could potentially send me an email about that. They could potentially, send me a mobile push notification about that product. Well, that works well for Apple because they've designed their own application. But with something like a Euclid, you could now, look at data and say, okay, we're noticing a lot of people are picking up this specific product, they're reading the packaging, but then they're putting it down and they're not walking out. Is it because of our price? Is it because of the way that we've, done signage in the area? Is it just the location in the store? You can start to adjust some of that. And then, it's easy to imagine a couple years down the road when not only is the data anonymous, but it starts to come with a little bit of consumer information in exchange for things like deals and coupons and offers.
Like a survey or something, right?
I'm more thinking of the idea that you would have this application that would kind of ping a store when you walk in. The store would be able to keep track of generally where you went in the store. And let's say, you go to the grocery store and you spend a lot of time in the fresh produce aisle. Well, now Safeway or another retailer could send you coupons specifically to that area of the store that you hang out at. And those coupons would be different from somebody that spends a lot of their time in the international foods aisle. It's more relevant data, and that's that value exchange. It's not saying, hey, we want to gather all this information and spam you and do whatever we can to, sell a bunch of crap that you don't want. It's saying, hey, we can, do some of the work for you to figure out what we know you do like, and then create offers specifically to you, the customer, that are going to make your shopping experience that much better. So that's kind of where I see this progressing, or at least where I would like to see this type of technology progress to, is not just passive data, but actually active data where the customer is getting something out of the exchange as well.
Well, this is a topic, and I'm sure you are too, Corey. I'm pretty excited about these sorts of things when you can have real world data like this happening, and the ways that you can tie, for instance, the mobile experience to offers and relevant offers, exactly, and other things in order to increase the quality of the experience, the shopping experience for folks in the real world, not only online. Sometimes it gets a little boring to only be stuck in the online world rather than being able to leverage connected technology, which again we'll be talking about in just a second. But before we get stuck on this too much, we've got a couple interviews, don't we, Corey?
Yeah, so we're going to jump into a couple of interviews that we did a few weeks back at the Mobile Loco conference. So we had a chance to talk with Juan and Sandra of Shop Near Me, which is a online service that basically goes and finds you deals and products from local boutiques. So they're aiming to take the small local boutique shopping experience and combine it with online geolocation in order to better connect stores with customers, which is a really interesting idea and something that I think we're going to see a lot more of. And we also had a chance to chat with Paul Nicholls of Blue Kangaroo. And Blue Kangaroo is sort of a deal, offer, discount, coupon style aggregator that brings all of those offers together, and rather than having them clutter your inbox, it gives you a single place to check and gather that information. So it allows customers to sign up for a lot more of those offers and not worry that suddenly their inbox is just going to be this giant collection of junk mail, because Blue Kangaroo is doing some of the work to actually sort that and highlight relevant offers out of the various things that someone has signed up for. So some interesting information from all of these interviews, and we hope that you enjoy them. All right, so introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about the product that you're demoing here today.
Hi, my name is Yuan Zhang. I'm the founder of Shop Near Me. Shop Near Me is a multi-channel platform for local boutiques and independent designers. We have a mobile app that shows you where to find the local gems who sell independent designer clothing and accessories, and also a website.
Nice. And how has mobile enabled you guys to connect these brands with consumers in a new way? What opportunities are you seeing that you're capitalizing on?
Yeah, so a lot of these independent designers, actually 99.9% of them are not on mobile yet. So that's a huge market for us to get in. We all know that consumers are switching to mobile platforms, and if they want to survive and compete with the bigger box retailers, they have to be on mobile platform as well. So we provide them the opportunity and also a marketplace so they can get the aggregated traffic.
So it sounds like you guys focus on smaller retailers. Do you think that people are looking more for kind of more customized things that are coming from smaller retails and less from these larger chains? Is that kind of a shift that you've noticed in the overall marketplace?
Yes, absolutely. So we started our app actually with all the retailers, including smaller independent ones and the bigger chains. We constantly get requests from our customers to see more independent shops.
Very cool. And then any upcoming trends that you're noticing, maybe things that you expect to be bigger in 2013?
So on the mobile side, I think mobile wallet and how to get the transaction easier on mobile is a huge trend that a lot of companies are working on. And also what part of what we are working on is it's also going to be a big trend. It's basically consumers start to consume and shop on mobile. And from this past Thanksgiving, we already see data going up that a lot more consumers has purchased on their iPad or iPhone. We're going to see a huge trend going up that way.
So in terms of reaching new consumers through ad platforms, do you think that there's a challenge with, keeping it inside of specific verticals and finding enough ad opportunities out there that are reaching your type of audience? So for your own platform, it would be reaching an audience that's interested in shopping and retail and that sort of thing. Are there networks out there, or is this an opportunity that you're seeing in the space?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity. The current ad networks are hugely based on gaming networks, and that those are not the kind of demographic we're looking for. So if we were going to use a network, and we want to make sure that they have enough lifestyle apps inventory, which is a huge challenge, and I think there's a huge opportunity there.
All right, well, thanks for answering a couple questions with me. All right, so could you introduce yourself to our audience and the company that you work for?
Hi, my name is Sandra Ponce de Leon at Sandramp on Twitter, and I'm here with Shop Near Me, and I just wanted to add to what Yuan is saying in terms of trends that we're seeing for 2013. One of the things that we see is a huge increase in terms of consciousness of consumers and a desire to support local business, and that's what we really think we're hitting the mark with Shop Near Me, is providing that ability for consumers to actually buy from from the places where they come from. And so I think that the fact that consumers are getting more conscious about wanting to buy local, not taking on all of the different pollutions and costs that are involved with importing goods from abroad, not to mention just the labor conditions from a lot of the other stores, the big box retailers, as Yuan mentioned, which do take advantage of much cheaper labor and also materials. So I think that's one of the major trends that we see, and that one of the trends that really works to the advantage of Shop Near Me.
Nice. And with the smartphone and tablet, because you're bringing it with you and you can kind of shop on the go, does applications like Shop Near Me, are they really seeing an opportunity there to connect consumers with local businesses and local shops in a way that hasn't been available previously through the desktop?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have our phones, our iPads with us 24/7. That's not the same. That's not the same case for a desktop. So I can literally be in a coffee shop and co-working with my girlfriend and wanting to take a little shopping break, and we can just browse through Shop Near Me, purchase an item, and actually go pick it up there locally. So it's definitely a great experience, and I think really the trend in terms of the way consumers want to interact with brands, not only local boutiques, but really any brand now. You really want it to be accessible on your mobile.
All right, I definitely agree with that. So hopefully we'll see more of that in 2013. All right, I'm here with Paul Nicholls, the Director of Business Development at Blue Kangaroo. Paul, could you tell me a little bit about what Blue Kangaroo does?
Sure. Blue Kangaroo is a recommendation and personalization engine for deals, offers, coupons for online shopping.
Nice. And what sets you guys apart from other deal and offer, apps in the space?
Sure. There are lots and lots of companies that will make offers available to you, but nobody does a good job of personalizing them and sorting through the chaos of the deal environment like we do. So what we do is we focus on serving up to you offers and deals, discounts that you're actually interested in, that are actually relevant to, what you are looking for, what you want to buy.
And what are some of the opportunities or advantages that the mobile space is enabling in terms of, providing deals that are relevant and not just, blanket offers, but getting very specific to what customers might be interested in?
Yeah, this is where we're particularly unique, and that is location. It's all about location. So what we do is we offer to you deals that are relevant to where you are. So let's say you happen to be, in the Mission Bay area of San Francisco, and you're looking for something to eat. Go to Blue Kangaroo, and we'll serve up, Groupons, Living Social offers, Restaurant.com offers, any kind of local offers that are available through Yelp. We'll offer all those things to you so that you can go to a local restaurant and get a discount.
Nice. And how do you see the industry kind of evolving, or what changes do you see coming up in 2013? Anything that you can kind of give us some insight on?
Sure. So we really think that more and more people are going to be using mobile, and a huge part of that is going to be local. So what people are going to increasingly want to be exposed to, have access to offers that are relevant to where they are. This is a new concept. Offers have not traditionally done that, but we think that we're very bullish on mobile and we're very bullish on location. So we think that those two things are really going to be evolving in the near future.
All right, and last question I have for you. So a lot of the coupons and offers and things to date have kind of been based on specific places and specific locations, but it sounds like you guys are doing some interesting things in terms of more than just one point in time, but actually kind of ongoing location tracking. Is there anything you can tell us a little bit about how that's enabling new types of offers?
Sure. So we are working with a company, Qualcomm, that is very bullish on what they call contextual awareness. And so it all has to do with location-based offers. So Qualcomm handsets track, they know what your route is every day. They know what your interests are based upon the fact that you've been into, let's say a Chinese food restaurant or something like that. So they know that, you might be interested in a discount at that restaurant. And so Qualcomm is launching this program called Gimbal, Gimbal, And so we are going to be the Lighthouse app. We're going to be the offers and discounts application within the gimbal effort. And we're very excited about that. It should launch in 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll be presenting at CES with Qualcomm about that very thing.
All right. Well, definitely sounds like something to keep an eye out for. Well, Paul, thanks for joining me, and thanks for sharing a little bit insight about Blue Kangaroo.
My pleasure.
All right, so returning from interviews, let's jump into our second topic for the day. And again, this was a bringing together of a couple of different stories, and these were actually stories that came out of CES, the big consumer electronics. Is it showcase or what's CES?
I think it's just Consumer Electronics Show. And do we even call it electronics anymore? I mean, it's,
I don't think we do. I think that's why they go by CES and not the longer acronym for it. So. CES, it's kind of a gathering of various technology companies to show both upcoming products and concepts that they're working on. And it's been interesting because a lot of people have kind of poo-pooed on CES lately. They've been talking about, oh, it's over, nothing big happens. But actually, I think there's been a number of really interesting announcements coming out of this year's show. And one of the trends seems to be the emergence of interactive gadgets. These are gadgets that are starting to talk to one another, and not just within single product lines, but across product lines. And so I figured maybe we'd talk a little bit about this and, what are the marketing implications? What are some of the benefits of connecting all of our devices together? What are some of the challenges maybe? So Adam, what's your take on this? Do you think this is just CEO kind of show fluff, or do you think this is a sign of an oncoming trend?
No, I definitely think, there's the term, and I'm not sure if I like it or if I agree to how the term is, what they call it, the Internet of Things, which is essentially referring to the connectivity, the connectedness of devices and technology around there. So, currently we have and it's all very much enabled by the cloud and obviously, ubiquitous Wi-Fi and cellular data and so on. But we have things like our computers that can easily trade and share data with our mobile devices, which is, our tablets and then also our mobile phones. The next frontier really is over the next year, it's going to be emerging is our TVs and our cars, believe it or not. It's places that we spend an awful lot of time. The rest are usually covered by our mobile devices or our computers and those sorts of things. And so I think some of the most exciting things that were announced at CES were related to, one, Nuance, who is they are the creators of the technology behind the Dragon Naturally Speaking sort of applications that allow you to dictate onto your computer and onto they have some apps for the mobile devices as well, but they actually are kind of the underpinning voice technology that has helped things on Apple devices, and I'm not sure about the Android devices as well. I think actually, to my knowledge, the Android side of things was developed by somebody else. And in fact, I think somebody that came from Nuance. But for the most part, they have kind of...
On the Android side, they power the very popular Swipe keyboard, which is the keyboard where instead of tapping the letters, you kind of move your hand between them without raising it, and then it looks at the endpoints of that gesture to form words. And I've heard from a number of people that it's actually preferred to other forms of keyboards, and they're actually starting to integrate Swipe into their other systems, which is why I mention it, because I do think that that's kind of their big into the Android market.
And so what they're doing is they're taking what was previously more kind of like language recognition and, in some cases dictation, and in some cases is turning it into, say, a search query and those sorts of things. And they're kind of expanding upon that in order to turn it into kind of a virtual assistant that would bridge multiple platforms. And so whereas Siri with the iPhone is pretty much on the latest generation iPads and is on the last few generation iPhones. And in fact, they announced that sometime last year that some cars would be considered, they call it Siri certified or something like that, where some of the very high-end cars would also have Siri built into them. They're creating a broader platform that would allow their voice technology to become an interface for various connected devices across multiple platforms. And as you were alluding to earlier, Corey, that means multiple vendors could take advantage of these platforms and in a way use this virtual assistant as kind of a connection point to allow multiple devices to talk to each other and also to follow preferences and things that you may want to, or that you may need from them. And so that nuanced announcement goes with a few expanded announcements regarding Ford and GM, and I think maybe even a couple other folks talking about it, but these guys to a larger extent having a software development kit, which is essentially their way of saying developers and programmers and so on and app makers, here you go, we're giving you a toolkit that lets you learn what you need to do in order to create applications for our platforms within our vehicles. And this is a pretty big deal because it means that very, very soon, and I don't have a Ford car with Ford Sync, so I don't know the full capabilities at this very moment, but very, very soon, because Ford has a Ford Sync platform that's been around for at least 2 years, I think. This is really expanding far, far beyond it and creating a platform that a new frontier for where applications can be available, where web access is going to become a little bit more ubiquitous, and eventually where marketing can find its way into.
Yeah, and so I think the way to think about this is right now with Siri, you can talk to your iPhone and tell it to do things on the iPhone, and you can talk to your iPad and tell it to do things on the iPad, but you can't talk to your iPhone and say, launch a movie on my iPad. Well, what these companies are trying to do is solve that problem. So imagine, bringing together Ford and this Nuance and other connected applications. So a lot of what was announced during CES were these kind of smart home appliances. So light switches you can turn on and off with your phone, and refrigerators that you can connect to your Evernote account, and all sorts of crazy things. But when you start to connect them, they make more sense. So imagine talking to your car and saying, I'm going to be home in 10 minutes, make sure the lights are on. And your car communicates that to your phone, which then sends a signal out to your light switch and turns the lights on. That's just a small example of that, but it's starting to show how, you're not just talking to your car and telling it turn the air conditioning on. You're talking to your car and telling it to go and do something in the outside world. And in order to do that, you kind of have to establish a single language that they can all communicate through. And so that's where Nuance comes into play, where they're saying, we want to start to define what terms and what language and what development code can be used to interconnect all of these devices. So I do think it's really interesting, and the idea of controlling the world around you with your voice has a lot of potential. So we would love to say Siri, I'm in the mood for a hamburger, find me a fun place to go. And then you just hop in your car and Siri has communicated that to your car, and suddenly your navigation is just automatically programmed to, a Five Guys Burgers and Fries down the street, and it takes you there, and you don't even have to think about it. It's using OpenTable, or it's using Yelp, and it's migrating all of this data together. And that's where the marketing side of it comes in. It's will you be able to affect that end result? Will you be able to, sponsor the restaurant that appears and somebody tells their car to take them to a fancy Italian restaurant? You can't now, but, a couple years down the road, I could see behavior like that starting to emerge. So I don't know if I'm living in a little bit of a fantasy land there, but I would love to see that. I would love to see these companies start to work together, because I think they're kind of all battling for control right now, but the true breakthroughs are going to happen when they all settle on something and agree to, build that thing together.
I agree with you. I mean, I think we're going to see it actually happening sooner rather than later. And I think, like you said, you stated it really, really well. How can you affect that end result, right? That is what everybody wants to say. This is great. When somebody wants information, if it's information that is relevant to my brand or my business, how can I make myself able to affect that end result? And as we've talked about in the past, we've talked about, for instance, just even in location, if somebody, we talked about the vast number of folks who are doing location-based searches, and they're looking for searches regarding, brick and mortar businesses, whether they be restaurants or whether they be someplace that they want to buy something or go visit or whatever the case may be, and how that drives quite a bit of traffic. So we've got places like, for instance, of course, Yelp doing that. We have Google Local now, which is in part Google Places and Zagat, amongst other things, Foursquare and so on. Well, now it's even more important to be likely a part of those beds of information, because those are going to probably be the forerunners in building applications for instance, the vehicles that we're talking about having these sort of systems and so on. And so it becomes more applicable when that information now is, when you use a GPS, for the most part, the GPS systems and the software behind those GPS systems, especially the more kind of early on GPS systems, are not connected to the internet. And if you want to update something, or the sort of data that's on it is canned and it's just there, you can't do much to improve upon that or update it beyond being somebody that knows enough to take usually a little memory card and sticking it in your computer and getting a new firmware update. This game changes now, because not only on our iPhones and our Android phones and so on, and do we have these navigation applications that are leveraging these databases of information. The iPhone, for instance, is with Apple Maps is using Yelp for their location-based stuff. You use Google Maps, you're using, of course, Google Places and so on. But now having this transferred directly to a dashboard in a car, where it's likely going to be used the most, it's so important in order to be part of that you're definitely going to be forgotten if you are not participating in making sure that your data is accurate and present in all the right places.
Yeah, and both of these are very early on in the process. The Ford thing, they didn't even really announce launch partners. They said, hey, this is now out there. Come to us with your great ideas. Nuance said, we're starting to bring our data together, but they need other companies to jump on board in order to make it big. So it's definitely a topic that we'll have to revisit. And I think, we will be revisiting in 6 months' time with a lot of interesting updates. But again, it's kind of showing that CES is the start of some of these ideas, but in order for them to grow, it needs support, it needs companies to come together. So hopefully we'll see that, because I do think that it could potentially unlock a lot of interesting opportunities for forward-thinking brands that, they hear something like getting involved in a car's dashboard and their mind starts racing, and they're thinking of all the great ways that they could improve the lives of the people that frequent their store. So I think a lot of things to keep an eye on there, and something that we'll definitely have to revisit. All right, Adam, you know what time it is.
The lightning round. I took it from you that time. I stole your thunder.
Round time. So we got a single lightning round topic for today, but it's a fun one. So I will put 60 seconds on the clock, and maybe I'll let you start us off. How does that sound?
All right.
All right, 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go.
So there's been some talk from the engineering blog at Twitter, and they were talking about how they are changing the way that they deal with searches for Twitter search. Previously, searches were a little, they were fairly inaccurate in some cases. So, during the debate, there was the mention of Big Bird, and as people look for something like Big Bird, they would instead find things about children's television programming and so on, rather than things that were a little bit more around, for instance, the debate and the politics and why that was happening. And so they are starting to actually augment their searching and the data around their searches with human curators who are going to look at that data in different ways and actually make the results much more accurate, and ultimately also allow folks who want to put advertisements against those searches, make those much more accurate as well.
All right, with 2 seconds left, you will save us from the lightning round sound. 60 seconds back on the clock, ready and go. The thing that was most intriguing to me about this was the fact that Twitter is using humans to differentiate some of this data. You would think Twitter they could essentially at this point hire any engineers that they want. They could create any technology they want. But at the end of the day, there still isn't a replacement for a human looking at something and saying, this is Big Bird the character or Big Bird the political reference. So it makes me wonder how this is going to filter down into sentiment analysis. Twitter is, occasionally kind of open source with some of their ideas. They talked a lot in this blog post about the technology that they've developed to power this real-time, search evaluation. So I would love to see some of this filter down into sentiment analysis. I think that, as good as sentiment analysis is in terms of being automated, it still takes a human interaction, a human eye to get it correct most of the time. So I hope that we see an improvement in sentiment analysis due to some of the work that Twitter is doing with real-time search. All right. Well, that was a busy episode as always, and we covered a lot, but we would love to hear from you. If you have any suggested topics, questions, feedback, or hey, even if you just want to say hi, we definitely encourage you to reach out. There's a number of ways to do that. The first and probably easiest is via Twitter. We can both be reached at SoLoMo Show, or if you'd like to reach myself directly, I'm available at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us. We both check the email address. The email is solomoshow@gmail.com. That's SOLOMOSHOW@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page, a Google Plus page, and a Pinterest account where we have a few boards with some of the episodes that we have produced and a few other things. And so you can go there and repin our content to your heart's delight.
There we go. And all of the links that we discussed today, as well as the links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. And if you're wondering to yourself, where do I find these show notes? They are available at solomoshow.com. They're also available, or should be available, in your podcast player of choice. So look around, you should be able to find those. And show notes is just our way of providing additional value to you, the listener. So let's say you were listening to us talk about Euclid Analytics and thought to yourself, that might be a great addition to my retail business. Well, there's going to be a link to that in the show notes. You don't have to try to figure out how to spell Euclid and Google around to find it. Just go to the show notes, click on the link, and it'll take you right there. You can also dive into the stories that we covered. Oftentimes there's additional things that we can't get to or additional reference material. So great thing to check out. It's a little bit of added value that we like to give back to the audience. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another great episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.